Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of After the Snuff. It's me, your host, John Millsip, and this week I'm not joined by any voted out castaways. I am joined by two back-to-back rocked out castaways, Emily and Connor. What a shame to have to talk to both of you in this situation. I knew I would get the privilege to talk to each of you eventually. Didn't want it to be like this. Didn't want to be it with neither of you getting voted out of the game. But here we are. How are you doing today?
Good. A lot calmer than I was initially.
Yeah, just what a whirlwind, huh?
Oh,
At least I
absolutely.
would, yeah. Yeah, at least me and Connor, in it together in
Yeah.
this.
At least you have
Yeah.
a friend this time. That's what it really
Yes.
comes down to, right? But let's dive into this. It's been a couple of weeks since we've had some Como Bluff on our screens. We got it back this week, and boy, oh boy, things just got wild right away. Let's just take it back to the beginning of the game here. Emily, of course, you're coming back after being rocked out in Moneta Bank. You are back here once again. Uh, what was it like getting the tap to come back, and how thirsty were you to play again?
I was really excited to play again. It was a great experience. I was really excited. I was like, let's go. Time to win it all. Not gonna make the same mistakes twice. And here we are. And maybe the third time will be my charm. Who knows? That's kind of my thought process. A little tough at first, to go out that way, but I was just so happy to be invited to play again. I feel like it's a really cool group of people every time, and it's really just been a pleasure.
And Connor, obviously, you are now part of this long lineage of Victoria-based players coming in, following in the footsteps of Sean and Selkirk and Kyle. What was it like for you coming into the game with so many people you know who could give you advice and how to approach the game?
Um, honestly, it was. I mean, I'm very grateful to have been chosen to come on for sure. Like you said, our whole friend group almost at this point, it seems like has gone through this game and played, and I just, for me, I was moving around so much so I couldn't actually do it. And then by the time I was kind of more cemented in what I was doing, I was like, you know what, I'll give it a whirl. So, but I think going into it, like I explained to you before, my biggest thing was I don't come from a huge Survivor background, but I'm good at like little odd desk games. Like I'm good at like little intricate little things like that. And I was just like, you know what? All my friends have done it. My goal right now is to beat how my friends did and just like kind of reign supreme over the friend group kind of thing. But honestly, like coming into this, I was kind of, I don't know if nervous is the right word, but like I was excited to like give it a chance and see what it was like. And yeah, I think the more we got into it, and I realized I'm like, oh God, I'm not the first one out. I'm not the second one out. Okay. I was like, now I gotta kind of like think about how this game is played. And yeah, I think it was the whole experience was like super fun. And yeah, after watching Emily get rocked out, I'm like, oh, so this is like what rock is. And then yeah, it was just yeah, it was I was just like, oh, come on, man.
Well, you both start on opposite tribes to start the game. In fact, you're never on the same beach with each other. You never interact throughout the game. So this is the first time we actually have you both together. So let's just kind of look at the starts of the games here. Connor, the first round, I mean, you're kind of the highlight of this first round here because you decide that when your Ardonix tribe has to go to tribal council and there's just five of you in a room and David and Brien aren't there, you decide, you know what, let's just flip a coin, figure it out. And you've backed it up with confessionals throughout your entire stint in the season. You just kind of wanted to sow that little bit of chaos. So, what was going through your head there? How did you come to the determination that, yeah, okay, I'm going to be the chaos guy? And how are you planning on capitalizing on that in the future in the game had you not been rocked out, ironically, by more chaos?
Yeah, so I mean I used the no experience to like sort of an advantage. It was really easy to be like, yeah, like I mean, I don't really think we went over our whole Survivor experience. Everyone kind of just mentioned that they played in like this game or this organization or whatever, right? And so for me, I was just like, well, I didn't do any of that. And I didn't want to say that I didn't do any of that because I didn't want anyone to be like, oh, well, that's easy. Like, we'll just turf him. Um, so when I was thinking about like how I wanted to play the game from like watching the seasons before, I was like, well, everyone like will play either like, way above the level and like stick out like a sore thumb, or like the victim card, or however you want to put it. But me, I was just like, I kind of feel like I just want to like, especially because we're not in person, it's really easy to just be like, we can use any of what we've got at our desks or wherever we are to our disposal. Like, I don't have a whole lot going, and like the first challenge was kind of, I mean, to be honest, and this is against this is against you guys. No one told me I couldn't throw more than one ball. I was just chucking them because you're like, just throw it and see if it goes in. I'm like, all right. So I just went bing, 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 and got roasted for that one. But when it came to the actual tribal council after and talking and stuff like that, I mean, there was what, seven of us at that point.
Yeah.
As soon as they tossed themselves out of the room, like this is the easiest thing in the world. Like, okay, there's five of us and two of them. And yeah, I mean, like as John knows and most Canadians know, we have a $1 coin, and I happen to have one sitting on my desk. And instead of making it like a long drawn out process because only got so much time to talk and communicate afterwards, I was just like, you guys want to flip a coin? Like this sounds way too easy not to do. So they're like, okay, sweet. And we flipped the coin, and it was just as easy as that. But yeah, I mean, like I spoke to you and McKenna and stuff like that prior to the game, and I was just like, honestly, like I don't want to ruin anyone's experience because I don't have as much experience. So I'm like, what if I just like play like the jester in all this and try and be as like weird and relentless as possible without making it as known? I thought like the coin was kind of like a good segue into that, and then
Mhm.
I tried to like just keep getting better and better, but then yeah, rocks. I got stoned in the head.
Yes. Well, and then Emily, on your Tarchia tribe to start, things were kind of a little different because there's the mistaken your name gets mistakenly thrown out by Margret in the early game. She's meant to say Beth's name. She like explicitly says Emily's really quiet, and you've been dominating conversation at this point. So I'm not sure why it wasn't a red flag for everyone when it was your name, but it's all you could really do. And because of that, we see this like kind of shift in the Tarchia tribe being like, oh, maybe we have to start looking at these returning players because that they're going after each other, so we have to too, right? So tell me about that. Tell me about the experience day of hearing, oh, Margaret's throwing your name out, and then watching it back and whether or not you actually think it was a mistake.
Yeah, so I think it's really funny because coming into the game, when we were announced as returning people, I was like, whoa, putting me on blast because the first game I played, I found out after the game that so many people had played before. So I was like, I assumed I'd be able to go in under the radar and just like kind of like n like navigate it that way. So when we were put out like that, I was like, well, there goes part of my strategy. So yeah, I mean, I think going into it, my mindset was because I had a feeling that the target would be on our backs. So my initial concept was to team up with Margaret, as I said in my I
Mhm.
believe in my testimonial. And and I think it's interesting because watching it back, yeah, I mean, since she said like quieter, that's obviously not how most people would describe me. So, I had a feeling that it definitely was an error, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, even though when someone comes to you in Survivor and says, "Oh my gosh, this was totally a mistake." Here's the thing. You can't believe that. Like you just have to play defensive. So I was like, so basically I just kind of had to switch gears and be like, "All right, it's not going to be me, it's going to be you now." So so although I do believe it was totally, I did watching back, I was like, okay, it definitely was an accident based on which how she was describing us.
Mhm.
And there's so many new people, like it's, like it's easy, really easy to mix up names. Because really her and I had only been in a room for like maybe like a minute or two in passing, and all of those were after that she had said that claim.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was definitely interesting. And I definitely had to go on a little bit more of an aggressive. In my testimonial, I was freaking out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting things about this entire situation that I find, like watching it back and seeing it, especially with like the confessionals that happened after the vote and after you've cleared it, that you were very confident in how much you were able to drive that vote.
Yes.
But it seems like from the episode that we saw, JB actually had this huge hand in pushing it off of you.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that watching it back?
It was really nice to see it was nice to see that like because once I shifted away from wanting to work with Margaret, I was like, okay, definitely gonna work with JB because I feel like he kind of had a lot of influence on the group and was
Mhm.
able to kind of help me push it off. And then it was a bummer because then I had felt like since he helped me do that, I was like, okay, we're definitely gonna work together now. And I honestly think it was really flowing that way and that we were influencing the following votes until I
Mhm.
got rocked out. So it was yeah, it was interesting to see it get back, but yeah, I definitely feel like I feel like I was confident, but I think that it was more of a team effort to get it off me watching it
Mhm.
back.
Yeah, I agree, and it definitely I think it really solidified you two as people who would work together along with Ava there, moving forward, and we see that in the subsequent episodes, right, where we see the three of you really working together, especially with these joint tribal councils. Well, we
Yeah.
get to the swap. Both of you end up in similar situations on your new swap tribes. You are part of a majority from your original tribe with one outlier.
What a nice
Uh,
switch from last week last time.
yeah, yeah, exactly, right? However, it doesn't work out that way, and there's two tribes going to tribal council each of these, so there's a lot more dynamics that have to be considered in all of this. Connor, you just come up with one of the most dominant tribes ever, apparently, in this new Ardonix tribe featuring yourself, Erin, Meredith, and Beth, and you absolutely annihilate the competition in that first immunity challenge. How did it feel winning that challenge, being safe with this new tribe, when, there's a bunch of chaos that's about to be sowed on the other side? And then in that moment, you also find out that you've been in Beth's basement.
All right, okay, hold on. Yeah, I mean, I'm thankfully do the job that I do every day, and I like work in a school because like things like that, like spelling things for different subjects, like I mean, it sounds so dumb, but like thank God I know how to like break down a word and then be able to do it again. Like that challenge was like I'm glad that like I'm just not me personally, but like our group was like very quick to be able to decipher words. And I know that I don't even remember the last word. Was it prehistoric that
Yes.
everyone got like really mixed up on?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I
Okay to
mean,
be dyslexic, I'll tell you right there.
oh, I mean, trust me, on the best of days, like I'm thank God just like here's a plan, you guys go for it and do it. Um, yeah, I think that was pretty big. But yeah, the the best basement comment was, to be fair, I mean technically it was it was in the basement, but it was definitely a weird conversation to have at the beginning. And I'm like, I know who you are. I pretty sure I've hung out with your brother and all these other guys, and it was cool because then by the time we all switched tribes and swapped again. Um, we had like for me personally, I had three in my original tribe, and then I had Beth, who was just from my hometown. I was like, oh, this is so free. Like I can just go in and like there's no awkward conversation. And then as soon as it got brought up, I'm like, oh yeah, this will be fantastic.
Yeah, and then I mean, Emily, on the flip side, you do get decimated in that first challenge and end up going to this joint tribal council where your original Tortilla tribe does have the numbers over the original Ardonix tribes. There's a 5-3 balance in your favor. And it kind of really pushes to this idea between, okay, are we going Logan? Are we going Brien? It doesn't seem like Julia's really in the conversation at all.
Hmm.
And Julia is one of the members who was on your new tribe. Can you just tell me why Julia seemed to not be part of that conversation at all? And was there any strategy into pushing the names on the other tribe rather than your own tribe?
I think realistically, in pushing it on the other tribe, the concept was I don't want it to be our team because I didn't really know their skills yet.
Hmm.
So I felt like if you're not sure, since it was really much like it was very much like it can't be our team because I don't know her skills yet. So for anything for we don't know what challenges are coming up. But one thing that I had said from the experience is, okay, we might have sucked at that challenge, but that challenge isn't coming back. That challenge is now done. So what are everyone's skill sets? So maybe we weren't the strongest in that one, but that challenge is now done. So we need to think about what we can be strong about moving forward. And because we didn't know her well enough, and she did not seem loyal to
Hmm.
her old tribe. She was very, very amicable and was very willing to work with new people. So we felt like that was kind of like a bridge to the old tribe, but also someone we could work with. So that's honestly the perspective I had when it came to not like making sure we vote someone else out is we don't want it to be on our tribe. Then it puts us at risk. Maybe that other tribe starts to bond more. We go back to another double council, and then now we're the lower number. Um, so yeah, and then obviously when it came down to conversations with Brien, it kind of made it easy, because he was very much willing to be like, not me,
Yeah.
and I understand because I did the exact same thing as Margaret. So I was like, all right, like I haven't chatted with Logan, so like plead your case.
Hmm.
So worked out.
Yeah, no, makes sense. I think there's also like maybe it's a subconscious thing, maybe it's just me reading into the situation too much, but I think there's also an advantage of keeping that person from your tribe in that instance, especially in the exact scenario that you're in, where there's three of your original tribe that you're already working fairly close with, and one person from the other original tribe that even if you like worst case scenario, you lose the next immunity challenge, it's a single tribal council and it's just your tribe going there, you kind of have an easy vote still, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
But that's not what happened. Let's dive into these episodes. Let's dive into this first episode here. We start off and we're kind of having the ramifications of the last vote. You know, JB's feeling really good about going after Logan over Brien because Brien seemed like someone who was more fluid, more willing to work with people. And JB
Mhm.
viewed him as someone who would be more helpful in the game. And even when he's saying about who he wants to work towards, or wants to work with moving forward, it's that idea of like you and Ava, Emily, and then Joseph and Richard. So it is sticking with that like Tarchia group there. But like you have Brien as this kind of weapon in the arsenal at that point because he has kind of shown this hectic nature at that point. Whereas on the flip side, we check in with Meredith over on the Ardonix tribe, and she's very glad it's a joint tribal council because it like maybe preserves some of the numbers from their original tribe, but is also a little worried because Margret went home. Does that mean everyone's targeting returning players? Although it seemed to me, and just based on a comment that you had, Emily, everyone forgot Meredith was the returning player on the other side.
100% they did. Yeah. Yeah. I think after we took out Margaret,
Mhm.
I think it never came up again that
Really?
I'd played before.
Yeah.
No, it didn't come up again. So I was like, I'm not bringing it up. So
Mhm.
I, and the thing is, I think it's also hard too, because I didn't work with that other tribe. I also had forgotten that
Yeah.
Meredith had played before. And I was like, and I remember in one of our side conversations, I don't think I made it the cut, but yeah, I didn't see it in the cut, but like we were talking like, who on the other side had played again?
Mhm.
And then people and like I wasn't gonna say and so I like didn't say myself or anything like that, and I just said, "Oh, I don't know who it is on the other tribe." I didn't say I didn't know who was on this tribe. I said I didn't know who was over there.
Yeah. Which is smart.
So
Smart way of
yeah.
pushing that conversation for sure. But it's just very interesting because like there are conversations like we don't see many people talking about you returning at this point either, but we
Mhm.
do see people talking about Erin as someone who's just
Yeah.
known in the community as a whole. I mean, it also helps that like so many people have played with Erin in this season apparently. But we see Erin kind of taking that pull for the like this is a returning player that we kind of have to be wary of, but no one's like we have the gun for Erin at this point, which is very interesting when you do see yourself and Meredith kind of like slipping into the background as returning players who, as you said, right, were introduced as returning players at the very beginning of the game, and people just promptly forgot it, apparently.
Honestly, that was the best case scenario.
Yep.
So,
So we get into this new immunity challenge, and once again, the two losing tribes will be going to a joint tribal council. This is Bet Your Bones. So each of the three participating castaways from the tribes have a total of 20 bones, and there'll be rounds of betting where you, as a tribe, are trying to bet the most amount of bones. However, you can't talk and discuss how many bones you're going to bet during the betting process. You have to strategize everything beforehand. You have to hopefully understand what everyone's going. And there's a bit of a catch. Everyone has to bet at least one bone every round. And as soon as someone runs out of bones, if they don't win the game, that tribe is out of the challenge. Honestly, this challenge took us a lot of time to perfect on the production side of things. We had to spend a lot of time trying to figure out these like little tiny rules of like how do we make this work? Because we were like, okay, how do we prevent people just from like not betting bones? And it's like, okay, we have to put the one bet rule in there, and like how do we prevent people from, because the other thing is like we're not telling you how many bones you have left or how many bones anyone else has left because that's part of the strategy of it. So you have to keep track of your own bones. So it's like, what happens if someone bets too many bones, like more bones than they have? Right. And it's one of those things where the rule actually was if someone bet too many bones, it would be wheeled back to the number of bones they had remaining. And then, of course, they have no bones to bet the next round. So that means they're out.
mhm.
And it's really complicated. And we see a lot of different strategy kind of take over here. We have Emily, your tribe kind of takes this like, we are going to stick so much in the middle with everything. We won't go too high, we won't go too low, so we'll have like this stockpile of bones if it goes late. And like maybe, everyone will be like, okay, we're betting low this time, and we'll just steal one or anything like that. Whereas Connor, your tribe kind of goes like okay, well, how about we just sandbag the first couple of rounds and then we can go harder for the next ones. And then on top of that, we see Tarshia go the exact opposite way, where they're like, okay, we go hard right away, and we see them just running out of bones. So, what type of strategy goes into this, Connor? How do you approach this, and how do you come up with the best possible solution? Because, I mean, obviously your tribe ends up winning, but how did you come to this strategy in the first place?
I think it's honestly like not to sound like silly again, but like it really was a coin flip in the sense that okay, so there's our group and then two others, right? Like we have to bet against two other groups of people. So again, I'm not mathematical by any means. Like my math skills, there's a reason I coach lacrosse. Um, but I was like, there's probably a good chance that one group or both groups will either go way above the scale or way below the scale.
Mhm.
And I was probably thinking to myself, I'm like, well, the best bet is, especially if they want to like make a statement in the game, is they'll go like super hard in the first couple rounds, be like, okay, we're up 2-0 already. Like, now we can kind of coast and just like kind of bet the minimum we need to win. And I thought to myself, well, if you do the opposite of it, if you go super low and you, like you said, sandbag the first couple rounds, then in which you saw like if you like saw the kind of the communication in between on like the strategy and stuff like that, we from the very get-go were like, we're just gonna go like 1-2-1, just in case someone else decides to go 1-1-1 or both go decide to go 1-1-1, like we win just off of that alone.
Mhm.
And then on the flip side, if they go way too high, then like obviously we've got like 19 bones left each. So it got down to the point where like we're keeping like mental notes on the side, like okay, these people have like completely blown through like probably half their whole quantity of bones. So it got to the point where we're like in round like 3 or 4, and we were trying to like do the math in our head, and we're like, okay, if we like kind of go above a little bit, and then I think it was Erin that ended up going kind of off kilter a little bit,
Hmm.
but it ended up working out because we actually needed the one extra to kind of like make it tip over what we needed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, hats off to her because she kind of did it on the fly. And again, like I didn't want to be the guy that did it, but she did it anyways. But yeah, the strategy going into it was just strictly sandbag. And then honestly, like at that point, we can kind of make like a heads up justification call. Like Aaron did. She's just like, that's also one more extra because we kind of need it. And yeah, I don't know how many we ended with, but like it was, everyone was like, oh yeah, we got 11 left. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, our tribe has 21 on the board. And everyone's like, what? So I think honestly, like it would have been like, yeah, do we like blow all of our bones right away, or do we sandbag? Sandbag is probably just easier because now like you don't have to think about it. You're like, I have so much room to work with.
And Emily, like in contrast to that, right? Your tribe is doing this kind of middle ground thing. How and one of the hardest parts about this challenge is the fact that you're not allowed to communicate with each other throughout it. So how do you as a tribe adjust to how you're seeing the other two tribes are approaching this challenge?
I think that was one of the things that we like struggled with transparently
Hmm.
because we had a plan going in, but I guess we talked a little bit about what our plan would be, but I think we didn't really I think one thing that I feel like I could have done or we could all have done better is really forecasting the expectations. Because our thought was by rotating different increments, we were thinking about longevity of the game.
Hmm.
We were thinking that we need to last as long as possible. So by doing in these increments, we are more likely to last. So I think we were focused more on how many rounds there would be
Hmm.
than how people were betting. And I
Right.
think because of that, it made it more difficult for us to adjust our strategy in real time just because, I'm looking at you right now, but like obviously there's no way for you to like really know that.
Hmm.
So I think it was one of those things where we needed a better contingency plan. And because we didn't have one in place, we stuck with what we knew
Hmm.
and what we had going for us. Um, or not go, we just stuck with the plan. And I think some like adapting would have been a better strategy for that.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Like this is kind of the reason why, and this is kind of part of the reason why I think minis are so exciting is because we give you like no time for strategizing. You get a decent amount of time for strategizing, but it's like, okay, you have to figure out what you're doing and you can't think of those contingency plans.
Mhm.
And it part of the excitement of that it comes out of the television aspect of that is watching you all struggle trying to figure out what to do.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And we went
Well,
back a couple times. It
yeah,
was, yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean time to like throw out the like production football on this one because I make a mistake in the show. I don't know if you guys realize it watching it back. However, on the first round, I'm on camera. I'm supposed to be giving the Marchosaurus totals, and I totally blank in that first round. That's why you hear Ben Horne come out, and you hear Ben Horne say it. It's like that's not John's voice. It's because it's not my voice. It's Ben's voice, and instead I realize the mistake I make. You can see me with this very dumbfounded look on my face as I'm like, oh, yes, I'm supposed to be talking now. And alas, we continue the challenge, and the Ardonic tribe wins. And they don't just win immunity, they also win these fancy
Mhm.
Como Bluff t shirts designed by our very own Austin Garso. Very happy to have them. Connor, you've received yours finally. It only took me months to deliver it to you, but it's okay. It's there in your hands now. It's exciting. Connor, how's it feel winning a not just like immunity, but also getting a reward that you can kind of like flaunt over all those other friends in your friend group who have played Survivor and haven't received a t-shirt?
It was a stepping stone, right? I mean, if you watch it back too, like it was a kind of a double-edged sword. The t-shirt obviously like inherently like the shirt itself is awesome because it's just like when we signed up for this thing we didn't expect, like none of us paid for anything, none of us, you know, tried to like bump ourselves up a line or anything like that. It was just like we had like time to give and experience something that was like super fun. Um, but like when you're in the game and you're like, well, I just like, for lack of a better term, just smashed the first competition when we like split up, and then to go in and win the next one. it was kind of like, all right, this is awesome, and like I got a shirt out of it. However, comma, we're in like now everyone's like we're in like the headlights as it was. I'm trying to
Mhm.
think of the word. Um, like we're now like everyone's like looking at us under a microscope, like, all right, these guys have like just breezed through two challenges now. Like we kind of have to like sewer these guys. Now we had like strength in numbers. I think I mentioned that in the confessionals afterwards, but at the same time, like that only gets you to a certain point because at some point, then like you're like, I'm kind of like a weird spot regardless, right?
Mhm.
But I think overall, the whole experience, I think all the challenges, regardless, were all like really well thought out. So I was gonna interject, but I didn't want to be that guy. Um, especially this one because it was just it made me think on like a different level than just like how is the game played.
Mhm.
It's more like, okay, we have to figure out everyone else's mindset on it, and we have to guess because we don't know everyone yet. Because at this point, like we're only like a few hours in, and we're like, oh well, now I have to like just based off of like either appearance, voice, whatever alone, or just experience, I have to figure out a way to read the situation, and I have to take a guess. So I think with this, like from the game point of view, it was awesome, and I had to really use my brain. From like an outside personality perspective, I'm like I just rinsed all my friends. Sorry, fellas.
Well, after this win again, the new Ardonis tribe seems to be very in line with each other. The four of you agree. You know what? This is the four now. Like we don't really care about those first tribe numbers. Like this is it. Part of that probably comes from the fact that your original tribe is losing numbers because you were outnumbered on those other two tribes. However, this is the four you want to commit with. Emily, I mean, Connor just mentioned it. There's that little bit of concern after winning two challenges in a row that people might start looking at you. Did you guys have any time to even think about the Ardonix tribe going into this tribal council?
Oh, 100%. That was the first thing it said is they're done. Like the first thing, like one of the first things so like people started saying, we're just like, as soon as we get out of this, like as soon as we merge, we gotta go after those people. Like that's literally like this is sentiment. So honestly, that's why I was like smiling and nodding when Connor was saying that. I was like, he's not wrong. That was literally the mindset for everyone involved. Like I think I probably said it. I'm pretty sure I said it too at some point. I was like, yeah, let's get through this and let's get those people out. Like um so yeah, you were right. Nail on the head. 100%. Like I mean, we were all worried about tribal, but like at that point I was pretty confident that I was in the majority. So like I was like, I'm hanging and I'm focusing on the long game to take those people out. Little did I know.
Well, the
So,
Ardonix tribe anticipates a merge coming up, and you all agree, okay, we're just going to meet in the shelter. But we'll save that. We'll wait till we get to that episode to talk about that aspect, about what happens there. We then get into the scramble of the Marchosaurus tribe and the Tarshia tribe. And Emily, I mean, this entire scramble comes down to Brien or Julia. They're the only two people from the opposing starting tribe. Which one do we go with? What conversations are going on? And I mean, ultimately, we'll get to the split later, but what was your mentality going into this vote between the two of them? Did you view either of them being more useful to you in the game moving forward? Was there an ideal outcome, or were you just like, whatever, we'll get one of them out and then we have numbers going into the merge?
I mean, I kind of went through a couple different thought processes to be honest, because one part of me was oh, like as long as I have my alliance, like I don't like whomever ends up going home, like they're both great people, but like I like whomever, like that's fine.
Mhm.
But then the second part of me was saying, okay, they're both of them are so willing to throw each other under the bus and claim the other has an advantage that
Mhm.
realistically, I wouldn't, I'm like, whoever goes out one, I want the other one out next because I can't
Yeah.
trust either of you to work with because they were previously working together and then they're like, so and so has like, she has a shot in the dark, he has an advantage. So now I'm like, okay, there's two advantages at play. Like, I'm trying to think about which one would hurt the game longer term. So then it becomes about who's lying to me? Like who actually has an advantage? Who's lying? So that kind of comes into the play next. So I feel like originally I was very much like they're both really cool people, but I'm like I already have my alliance set, so it's like whomever. But then it started to become which which advantage is going to hurt us in the long
Mhm.
run. And then the third thing is like a little no in my ear is, are you lying to me
Right.
about each other? And also, I can't trust you because you're willing to throw like concept of anyone but me is not a concept this early in the game that you want to hear because at some point anyone but me is going to mean you
Yeah.
like, as the person. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really hard. And it didn't, I think what part of the issue with this is like nobody really had a preference as to who went home.
yeah.
Ava, I think, came out the strongest in this moment, being like, you know what, let's just get rid of Brien. I know it's on my tribe, and like it makes Joseph and I just a two. But I mean, realistically, at this point, we're starting to get down to 10. If you know anything about DCP history, there's a lot of merges at 10 in DCP history. So that's there. Obviously, Julia does know a merge is coming no matter what because she used her question advantage to find that out, which again motivates her to use the shard in the dark this round. And all this kind of comes out, and there's a lot of conversation there. And I think there's this one interesting thing, there's like this holdover from the last vote that kind of like throws a little wrench into everything. Joseph's hinky vote on Brien in the last round kind of screwed up the numbers of what you expected. Was there any conversation, Emily, about why was there this extra vote for Brien in the last round?
Honestly, not that I can like not that I can really remember. I think sometimes when like since the vote was kind of going the way I was voting for, I was focused less on the votes in opposition and more on like yeah, so yeah, I personally didn't speak to it too much, honestly. I wasn't really thinking about it. I in retrospect I definitely should have, but not in the moment.
So again, we have these like smaller groups coming together. We see you, JB, and Ava come together, kind of just like agree, this is the plan. We're going to vote Brien. That's what it is. JB mentions it being a reverse Matt Singh for the other tribe, which I mean kind of makes sense. When we're talking about it, obviously the freelance for that, the parlance for that is the idea that like Matt Singh was the tribe that Denise and Malcolm originated on in Survivor Philippines. And what they did is they got their numbers so low that they could just kind of like go through the rest of the game unscathed. And so JB's kind of pitching this idea that like, no, 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 they're getting their numbers so low that we're just going to keep piling on them and take them out there. Uh, and like, you guys have so many numbers in question that you have that luxury of being able to pile on them. Um, and all we really see in this scramble is we see Julia pushing really hard. I don't want it to be me. Make it Brien. And then eventually we see Brien doing the exact same thing. It's like both realized that, hey, it's either me or you. That means I have to push you. Connor, if you're faced with that situation, what other option do you have other than pushing your ally's name?
I think, well, again, from an outsider looking in, there's like one obviously like very legitimate answer, and it's just throw the next person under the bus. The one thing that like, and again, it really depends on the time frame you're given because we're not given a whole lot of time to talk amongst ourselves and try and figure it all out. I think the only other thing you do is just, and I was thinking about it when you were talking about it. I think, what if you just like threw a wild card name out? What if you're
Mhm.
just like, yeah, these guys are like definitely firing against each other, and they make it very well known that it is like her or I or vice versa, right? I think the one thing that no one did, everyone got like very complacent because it was Julia or Brien. Um, I think if it was me, just again with my like lack of experience, I would have just like thrown someone else's name out there and just been like, okay, well, there's four of us in this call, there's three in this call. They're like pleading their case for like why it shouldn't be me. I would have been like, why don't we just throw the other person there too? and like just like totally screw it up. But I mean, again, that causes like you have to think like longevity. I mean, Emily's mentioned a couple times now, like you have to kind of think like long term what that does, and in turn, like it kind of puts a target on your back because you're the one that said it. But at the same time, I mean, like it's hilarious. B, you're like, where did this come from? And everyone's like, I don't know. Watching it back now, it kind of, at least for me, if I ever do something like this again, it's just I always keep a quarter in my pocket. That's kind of what I learned. When I do anything, I keep a quarter on me, and I'm like, it's just we'll leave it up to fate at this point. But yeah, I think overall, I when I watched the actual episode, obviously because I'm in another room, like just we're sitting there like we're like eating lunch and we're like doing all this stuff and like we're moseying, like we're good. Um, and I mean, I think if you look back at the footage too, we're like sitting there like, I wonder like what is going on in there, and like people are like scrambling through everywhere, like trying to. I didn't realize how big it was because again, the other thing you notice over the course of the episodes is no one really talks about what happened. Like a lot of the information is like really hidden. Because by the
Mhm.
time like we went up for tribal council, like I had like even in the previous rounds, like I had no idea what anyone was talking about. Like all I knew was the information I had.
Mhm.
And a lot of it's not shared. So there's all like a lot more secrecy than I thought there would be. I thought people would be a little bit more open to speaking about what happened, but yeah, I think to kind of like cap it off, with the lack of experience, I think I would just throw someone else's name. And it's been like they're fighting for it. Like, why not we just throw a wrench into this thing? Like, it sounds kind of funny.
That's actually really interesting you said that because so obviously this is my second game ever playing. My first game, my strategy was literally I will never say the name because then I can always say, well, I didn't say it. And that way I can always rebuild a new alliance if I needed it.
Mm,
But this game was so different because very early on I was forced to have a name in my mouth because I was on the chopping block.
mm.
Um, so I think in that case, I think that is a really interesting take. But I guess from looking at it from my tribe majority perspective, although I was pretty set on JB and Ava for my alliance, when it came to merging and going after your tribe, didn't want to risk taking out my numbers. And that was part of it. So I couldn't risk throwing out one of those names because then I would risk my alliance thinking that I'm not aligning with them anymore and they turn on me. And then or I wouldn't have the numbers and then the people that I went after their alliance would then team up with y'all and go after my alliance.
It is like interesting to think about, right? Like you don't know. Again, I mean, I've said it a couple times, but like you don't know what people are thinking because again, like the time frame in which you actually get to speak to people, if you don't win, right, is so small. And you can't, it's not like you can like run off to another room and like talk amongst yourselves. Like you are visibly in a room where people can see where you are and who you're talking to. That's like it's so like the room for error is so much smaller that you have to be able to adapt in such a way that like I don't know if you kind of like noticed. Um, I mean, like I mentioned the coin flip like later on down the line, I think, but um, I mean, even maybe it was in this episode. I think I mentioned. Oh no, it wasn't. Anyways, what I'm saying is like I was like very transparent when I said stuff because that was kind of part of like my strategy going into it. But I think that yeah, I think that's just one thing that I never could like decipher from people is like, oh, what is going on? Because you're so in the dark, and I just yeah, to a point, I just wish I knew a little bit more because then I could be like, oh, I'm not the most like, I'm not gonna just like inherently do something because everyone else is doing it, but I'm also not gonna screw the rest of the game for everyone else just because I feel like screwing the whole game for everyone else. There is like you have to be a little bit smart when you're like trying to do something a little sillier, I guess.
Well, I definitely knew. I wish I knew who had the real advantages and stuff like that. If so, I wouldn't have gone home.
Yeah, no, that's
Oh,
fair.
well, and like that brings up a big part of this entire conversation is both Julia and Brien reveal that the others have advantages to everyone as part of their like reasoning to get the other person out.
Mhm.
And really, Brian's advantage in this instance is the legacy advantage. There's some confusion about it. You don't know exactly when it's going to work. I mean, historically, legacy advantages have worked at both the merge and later on in the game, like Final Six. but you never know what's going to happen in a DCP game when it comes to a legacy advantage. And Julia has the shot in the dark, which of course is like a newer. Yes, okay, we're 7 seasons into Survivor having the shot in the dark now, but it's still a newer concept that people kind of like forget exactly the mechanics of how it works sometimes. And I think that's kind of what comes down and ends up biting you in the butt here, Emily, is the fact that the shot in the dark requires the user to sacrifice their vote in order to try for it. And we see the conversation of the five of you, yourself, JB, Ava, Joseph, and Richard. And you're like, okay, we're gonna do this. They're gonna vote for each other. That's fine. We'll put what is it? You'll put the guys on Brien, girls will vote for Julia, and then yeah, that's fine. We did it. However, because of the way that split works, and because
Mhm.
Julia has a shot in the dark and is sacrificing her vote, that split actually makes it so it's a tie.
You can never trust. Here's the thing. Here's the thing about that. You never, ever trust someone else's math. Like
No.
that's what it comes down to. And the thing is, I was kicking myself so much because when we were talking it through and pushing out the numbers, realistically, we should have done what Connor said. We should have just flipped a coin
Hmm.
and just taken someone out and really put all the votes. I think by being indecisive as to who we wanted, that is what led to what happened. Because, and I think, no, hey, Brian, but like going back, I would have said, let's take out Brian. His
Hmm.
advantage is down the line, which means it
Yeah.
won't hurt. Like shot in the dark, if she does shot in the dark is really hard to pull off and
Hmm.
get what you want out of it. So it's an advantage, but it's really an advantage with a grain of salt. So because there's great risk to yourself as well, naturally, as we all know, with the sacrificing a vote. So I think looking back, I would have said his advantage is a higher risk. Let's all put the votes on him, but let's tell her the votes are on her so she still uses it.
Hmm. Yep.
And that would have, looking back, like hindsight's 2020, I think we were trying to break up the vote to interpret because I think we were all thinking, she's probably going to get it or,
Hmm.
whatnot. And regardless, it's best to divide. But I think by trying to take a step back from being too decisive in the group to not push myself on a higher threat level, I ended up contributing to my undoing, unfortunately.
And the interesting thing about this is like throughout this entire time, again, there's no real push for either of them to go, right? Like it doesn't ever become clear that like either Julia or Brian is the express target of this vote. It's just like we need to get one of them out. We'll split the vote in order to just beware of advantages, just in case, something's out there that we don't know about, because there was the question advantage early on. So you don't know what that advantage is at this point, right? So it could be anything. And it's just really funny looking back at it because if you had just switched the way you decided to split the vote with the girls on Brian and the boys on Julia, you'd still be in the game.
Yeah.
And it's those little tiny details that we don't think of. But what we get is, everyone's like, okay, we can do this. And then we get that one clip right before tribal council of Joseph being like, the split doesn't work. This will cause rocks. We see Joseph talk to, I believe, JB about it. Did Joseph ever have an opportunity to tell anyone else that you know of
No.
about the fact that this math was going? Or
If rocks had been thrown out as an idea, you bet your bottom I would have said that's not an option because I know how rocks is decided. I know my luck for my shout out to Moneta Bank. That's just my luck, and I know it would be me. Like as soon as the wheel took out, I was like, it's me. I just knew it. I felt it in my bones, Como Bluff bones. Like
Mhm.
I felt it. So I was like, if that had been something that I had realized in the moment, then I wouldn't have let it happen. To be honest, like having like shot in the dark, I didn't like at the time I didn't understand it entirely. Like
Mhm.
I've done research since then and like watched more Survivor since then and saw it obviously in real life, like for like that Survivor. So like I saw that happen,
Mhm.
but I did not realize her would go away.
Mhm.
So I guess I also part of my undoing was not fully realizing the sacrifices that she would be making to get that advantage. And I
Mhm.
think had I known that, I might have brought that up as well. But I think that's just part of it. I think we were all so confident in taking one of them out that we didn't realize that that could happen.
Yeah, and we get into tribal council, and there's no point in tribal council where Joseph even mentions this, which is again, it's one of the tricky things about tribal council, right? You guys have a solid plan. Is it a safe place at tribal council to bring up, like, if you're in Joseph's shoes and you make this realization, oh no, we are going for rocks? Is it a safe space to say, hey guys, our plan doesn't work, we have to change it?
Honestly, I feel like if personally, I feel like if I had realized that, I probably would have said it
Hmm.
just because I would have known that my name would have been on the wheel because he didn't
Right.
have an advantage. So he like so although it fell on me, I don't think I think it could have just as easily been him or Richard or JB or
Yeah.
like it could have just as easily been anyone else. So I think it's one of those things that I understand where he's coming from because he doesn't want to spook like the people we're voting on, like letting them know our strategy. But I do think in retrospect it would have been ideal because he just as easily could have gotten himself out.
Hmm.
But I mean, at the end of the day, like I think I feel like but also you meant like he also mentioned to JB. So JB equally also could have said like, hey, like not timeout, but like guys, like, because I mean, I think there's something to be said, like Connor said, just like throwing information, like
Hmm.
sometimes a little chaos needs to happen. So I think we none of us were willing to like commit that chaos yet because it was
Right.
so early in the game. And also, I have to acknowledge that if Joseph did do that, it would have caused chaos, like in
Hmm.
tribal council. And I don't think anyone wanted to be the creator of chaos at that point.
Well, I mean, we get here, we get to the vote, and even as Joseph's in his voting confessional, we see he's still doing the math. And I think this is actually part of the reason why he maybe didn't mention anything,
Yeah.
is he had that realization right before tribal council was called and didn't really have enough time to process it to be like, oh wait, am I right or am I wrong here?
Yeah.
And we would see in his confessional in the next episode that he's leveraging it to say that, oh, he intentionally said Brian by like doing it this way and everything. However, I think there is just this like struggle of like, oh my God, is this math right? Is it wrong? The 1 in 6 of Julia's shot in the dark hitting is technically worse than going to rocks with 5 of you. Like, right? Like there's a higher chance that you're going home off rocks than you are off Julia's advantage hitting. So it is very interesting seeing that dynamic. You could have even the way like the split worked, like all you had to do was put again, like you just put the 2 votes on Brian and it works instead. Um, but it was just like the way that that split worked out. And we see it in the vote reveal, right? As the votes are being read, we get the 3 votes for Julia, and then the votes for Brian are coming out.
Starts to process. Everyone starts to
Yeah,
realize it in real time.
yeah, and you can see it
I
in
know.
everyone's faces.
Yeah, I know. I'm probably, yeah. Like, I remember I saw my face back and I was like, yeah, that's exactly how, like, I was like making the same face watching it back because I was like, you just see it. You
Yeah,
see it coming. And it's,
yeah, and it's that
yeah,
realization on Brian and Julia's face that I think is really exciting about this tribal council. That realization of, oh my God, somehow
we
this
survived.
still worked. We survived. There is no way either of us are going home here. The 5 original tortillas are all on the wheel. And then we get to an unfortunate point in DCP history where Emily, you become the first person ever to be rocked out of the game twice.
You know what? Everyone's got to be famous for something. So,
You're a hero in
uh,
all their eyes.
what do you say?
I said you're a hero in all their eyes. She's like she bit the bullet twice.
You know,
That's
at least I can say I've only ever had, I forget what the number is like, I guess like one vote on me, 2 votes
Yeah.
max.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like,
So.
delving into this entire thing, it's not even just that you were rocked out of the game twice. It's you were rocked out in the exact same position in the game twice. That last vote right before merge.
Oh, yeah, I knew. As like I mean, you saw it. Like I was so upset because I was like I just missed the merge. I was
Mhm.
like, God damn. Like I was like, damn, I don't get to be on the jury. Like I don't get to see what's happening in real time. Like so obviously I'm no spoilers, but like, I still don't know what a lot happens.
Mhm.
And I'm like so jelly because I'm really excited. I just have to wait like everyone else to find out. Like obviously, I know some things, but there's so much that I don't know,
Mhm.
right? So I'm like, yeah, that was a huge bummer not to make it to the merge. And I was so bummed because I felt like when I went out the first time, when I went out the first time, I was I was at a disadvantage and I was slowly climbing myself out of it.
Mhm.
This one, I had been at a disadvantage. I climbed myself out and I felt like I was standing pretty safely in a really good position.
Mhm.
So I felt like I could have really been successful going into the next phase, but I did basic math wrong and I didn't understand a concept enough and I didn't want to show I guess I didn't want to ask questions or maybe I just didn't want to show
Mhm.
that I didn't know. Um, and unfortunately it was my undoing, but yeah, it's definitely tough, but as soon as the wheel got out, I knew it was me. Like I knew it was coming. And so everyone's gonna be famous for something.
Yeah.
So here we are,
Well,
2 for 2.
so well, let's just talk a couple of hypotheticals here. Obviously, like you had that alliance with JB and Ava going on. Was that your intention going into the merge just to stick with those two, or were you going to reach out to some of those people you hadn't had the opportunity to meet, the Connors, the Aarons, the Merediths of the world?
Um, I felt like I was gonna stick with them too. Because I just think from watching Survivor as a kid and watching it into adulthood, yes, sometimes you do need to pivot off of certain alliances, but I think realistically, like although we weren't 100% with Richard and Joseph,
Hmm.
they were still connected to us because JB
Yeah.
had connections with them. So we still had the numbers. We still would have had the numbers going into the merge. And I think that we would have stuck with a 3 with a smoke screen of a 5.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
that would have been the mindset going into the merge of smokescreen 5, actual 3. And that would have been the approach going in. And then also, no hate, Connor, but we definitely would have pushed the fact that like they were dominating on these challenges. And realistically, they had more immunity challenges under their belt already than all of us. So although we would get points with a hypothetical jury for gameplay, they would have challenge immunities, which also speaks highly to individual skill set. So it's like depending on the way you would ideally prove your case at the end of the line, like and how you want to play your game, I would probably have fed into that mindset.
Right. And I think the one more important question here in our world of hypotheticals, out of the five of you who are eligible, who would have the best person for your game in that instance for the wheel to land on instead of you?
Probably Joseph. I would say of our original tribe, I had talked to him the least amount. I had
Hmm.
started to talk to Richard a lot more in the game, so I think we could have brought him into more of our alliance. I just hadn't gotten as many chances to speak to Joseph because even when yeah, like I think even when everything was going on with like me versus Margaret situation, I think that I didn't get as much FaceTime with him, and it was purely based on testimonial polls. So like
Hmm.
I just didn't have as much FaceTime. So I think because I had more FaceTime with Richard, we're also from the same region of the States.
Right.
So I feel like we could have found more we just like we would have had we could have I could have probably played the Jersey card. Or like the Northeast card.
The
Like
Jersey card.
in terms of
It,
just like
that's helpful
common ground.
sometimes having
Common
that.
ground thing. Yeah, no, like
Yeah.
common grounds. Like Connor said with like Beth being from his hometown, like you have like so like when you find out someone from a similar region to you, like it makes sometimes it can make it a little bit easier to find like commonality. So I think unfortunately I probably would have liked it to go on Joseph, but realistically I never really wanted I never wanted this round to even have rocks.
Yeah.
So I in an ideal world I would have not wanted it to be Joseph, or myself or really any of the five of us on that
Yeah.
wheel. So.
Yeah. totally reasonable, especially given your prior experience in the game. But we're sad to see you go. Obviously, like production bemoans it. I mean, like obviously there's something of watching like a returning player get voted out of the game, but to watch a returning player who we brought back because, we felt your opportunity was cut short last time, only to have it go the exact same way. It's a wild experience. It's so unfortunate. We were all bummed, but we've got we got a rest of the season to work with still.
I can at least say I feel like this one was more my fault. Like I feel
Mhm.
like at least like I take more responsibility for this one
Right.
because I feel like there was some I was in a good place and there were some mistakes that I made, but I appreciated knowing like what like the cast members like who people had like favorited for me and stuff like that. I would obviously love to come back and do another mini or like a larger extended one, whichever one ends up working, but it was still a great experience. It was a
Well,
bummer obviously, but to be rocked out twice, but happy to make history and would love to come back another time.
yeah, well, hopefully this is history that won't be broken anytime soon.
Jesus, I hope not.
Because we really don't want multiple people getting rushed out of the game.
Yeah.
Or people getting rocked out of the game multiple times. Because we do have multiple people getting rocked out of the game. Connor, let's move on to you.
I
Uh,
segue. I
Nice
segue.
second, yeah.
so we get back out of, this whole hubbubaloo, oh yay, rocks, fun stuff. Um, we have some like the realization of, hey, maybe we should do math before we split votes. Little hindsight being 2020 there. Yeah, but we have Ava and JB both saying that Joseph says that he had to vote for Julia in order to preserve Brien in the game. Brien as him seeing Brien as someone who he could work with a little bit more in the game if he's there. Maybe, we take that 1 in 5 chances against me rather than the 1 in 6 for Julia in order to position himself better. And then, we get to emerge. Emerge. Connor, how did it feel making the merge?
Um, I mean, obviously it feels good because there's so much uncertainty going into it because again, you don't know A, when it's gonna happen, B, what does happen when it does kind of shake out, that you kind of have to like change the way you think and the way that the game's played kind of on the fly. So, obviously it feels really good. And then to realize that when the merge hit, that three to the four were from my original tribe felt really, really good. And then the fourth to be like someone that I can kind of connect with on like, hey, we're from the same city. It makes it even like that much better, right? Like again,
Mhm.
you don't know what challenge is going to be. You don't know who's got what. You don't know who's talked to who. But in that case, for me, I know who's talked to who because we've all talked together.
Yeah.
So going like, that's why in the game, like it was really good to know that like I had Erin, right? Like again, Erin and I talked quite a bit during the game. I
Mhm.
think like her and I were the first ones to kind of speak up when it came to when we did win a challenge. Like we were the first ones to like again, we weren't even necessarily talking about strategy. It was just we were the first ones to talk in general, right? In a group of people that you probably don't know all that well, or don't have like an actual relationship outside of the game with. It's kind of cool that like at least someone will kind of pipe up and be like, you can bring either you don't always have to talk about strategy, but just like even if it's just like comic relief, right? Like even if it's
Mhm.
someone just like, oh, that was awesome, and like again, those are kind of the scenes you don't really see because the winners don't get a whole lot of like screen time after because all like the juicy stuff is with the other tribes who are like just going through the ringer. But yeah, like just like that downtime is like no one really puts into perspective how important that really is. And because like as you saw from the very first episode, we were on the chopping block very first, you don't really know what like the social aspect is until you've actually won it. And by the time we won
Mhm.
it, it was, everyone was kind of thinking, oh, it's like such a relief, but like really, and Emily said it best, like it's not really a relief because people are still like chatting about you in the back, and you're like, oh, like who is really gunning for us now, and like which one of the four of us are they gunning for, right? Like it's
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes into it, but yeah, I mean, I think some of those things now looking back at it, I have like I have a sorry, not more, but like a better understanding of what it truly takes to play like an entire game, and not just like the challenges, not just the communication, but the stuff outside that you don't really see during the episodes is I have a greater I'm sorry, I have probably like a better fondness for being able to like communicate with people like that.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we're in the situation. We're in the merge. Sorry, Emily, you can't talk about the merge. You don't know. You haven't met one yet, but it's fine. Uh,
Too soon.
so we get to this first immunity challenge. First individual immunity challenge, and you have to take a solo cup, stick it up against a wall, put a ping pong ball there, and then stack solo cups out, holding it with one hand. It's just a nice endurance challenge to get us going here to start the merge. Carter, how'd you feel about this challenge?
You know what? I going into it, I felt pretty confident. Like, again, not saying that like everyone will throw out like any random facts just to like make themselves, whether it's like a mental thing for them to like get them through whatever challenge it is, or to like make themselves feel or appear more wanted, or I don't know what the word is right now, but um, I was like, okay, it's like let's just nail this down for a second. I went to college. I experienced what college was like. I'm like, I see a ping pong ball. I see a red solo cup. I'm like, there's like 50-50 shot that like this is an okay challenge. And I'm like, I have like sort of a sports and endurance background. Like I'm like, this will be fine. And then I realized very early on, not so much in like the actual like cup pong challenge, but this one specifically, that I went to the dollar store and got my solo cups. So if you look back, and I try to make it really not apparent because I'm like, this could go two ways. One, really good because they're so pliable that I can just hold them and grip them. Or, as you saw what happened, they became so like pliant from sitting on the wall that they were so rickety and they're so squishy that I couldn't hold on to it anymore. I'm like, these things are like slipping in like four different directions, and I've got like a perfect square, but they're all like lined up facing out to me. And yeah, so if there's anything I've learned from this is just like spend an extra $4 and go get like the real ones because these ones suck.
Oh, well, there you go. It's Selkirk's Tiny Dice again.
Oh,
Surprisingly,
yeah.
one of your close friends has a issue with challenge supplies that they brought them for themselves to the game, and it still haunts the Victoria crowd with not bringing proper supplies. You literally could have been like, "Hey, John, do you have solo cups? I have literally 100 solo cups on hand at all times because of these games."
Well, like I have them, and I'm like, there's so many in here, but I didn't like I haven't taken them out since I moved. I'm like, all right, well, like I got solo cups, sure, and then I put it against the wall where I actually need like the actual cup to be more than something to drink out of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a reason why solo brand is like the standard when it comes to these things. It's not just because it's, hey, this is the type of cup, because they also have a decent quality to them. So yeah,
yeah,
spend that extra $4 if you're supplying things for challenges. Get actual brand name things.
yeah.
I don't
Hot
like
tip.
shilling out brands, but it actually could be the difference between you being able to do a challenge and not.
Oh, 100%. Like it's not even close. Like that was I'm not gonna say it's the only reason, right? Like it is an endurance challenge and it is tough because like if you haven't done it before, I mean, I'm sure people may have practiced before, but the ping pong ball especially makes it that much
Mhm.
harder. And you're sitting there like they were probably going for like what felt like 4 hours. Like at that point it felt like a long time. And like you're just sitting there like at that point it's not even like your arms are already like burning. Like it's a mental thing at that point. And yeah, it was tough. Just spend the extra money.
Yeah, absolutely. It is tough. And I'm just trying to pull up the thing here now to see if I can figure out exactly how much time there was on it. But I can't remember exactly what the intervals were. But it wasn't a short period of time. And you also have to keep in mind, by the time we get to the end of the challenge and we have Joseph and Julia going head to head, they have stacked 9 solo cups. And you start with 2, and they've
Yeah,
gone up to 9. So they've been going a while, and they get to that one finger point, which part of the hard aspect of this challenge is knowing how much pressure to apply at any given time because it's tough. It's tough to be able to do that. And I mean, I had in challenge testing, I had issues even with like solo brand cups because I would apply too much pressure
Hmm.
to the cup and it would kind of crumple in my hand. So those instances are there, but this is not an easy task by any means. It's not something people have practiced because who the heck says yes? Put a solo cup on the wall, then put a ping pong ball, and then put another solo cup, and we'll go from there. Not something you're thinking of going into a challenge. But something else happens in this challenge after, I mean, Joseph ends up winning immunity, but amidst this challenge, anyone who found two fossils at the dig site received a clue for the hidden immunity idol. Emily, if I recall correctly, you did have two fossils found, right?
Yep. Yes, I
Connor,
did.
did you?
No, I whiffed on all of them.
I did, and I lied about how many I got.
There you go. Well, if you just didn't get rocked out, you could have actually put it to use.
Yeah.
It's okay. I mean, probably better than Connor just not being able to do anything. And because this message went out to the people who found the fossils, Connor, did you even have an idea that there was an advantage floating around at this point?
I mean, you have to kind of think about it. There's not no reason for these fossils to be here, obviously. They
Mhm.
wouldn't just be there for aesthetics. Like there has to be something to do with them. But I think I learned a little too late um that the fossil sites weren't like specifically individualized. They were
Mm,
because that's what I was thinking, right? Like I
right.
was like, well, they could go two ways with it. You could either make them individual, that way it's even across the board, or you could put them all in one place and everyone's fighting for the same ones. And I think with everything that's going on, and again, being my first game, I kind of like put the fossils to the backside. I know there's always gonna be
Mhm.
like not so much like a gimmick, but there's gonna be like a something towards like the
Yeah.
theme of the season. But I think at that point I was like, I can't even remember what round we're on, like four or something like that. And I'm like,
Five.
yeah, I mean even more so, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
just like there has to be something, and now that the game's like shifting towards this whole merge thing, like it has to be coming up something. But at that point in time, I was more like, I wasn't so much worried about like all like the hidden stuff behind the scenes. I was just like, I'm just gonna play the chaotic piece again, and just like at this point, like I don't have anything like backing me. I don't have anything protecting myself, other than like my personality, and that's all I could go off of because that's all I had. But at that point in time specifically, no, I didn't think it was gonna be like that apparent. But I probably, in hindsight, I probably should have thought that like it was gonna be a thing at some point. Again, I didn't hear anything because I didn't see anything. I didn't find
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
I mean, like I actually just recently threw out like the pad of sticky notes, but like I had the chart on like a sticky note, and I could see who had gotten what.
Mhm.
So I think at that point, like now watching the episodes back, I think I had them all on the sticky note, but I'm like, what if there's more? What if there's stuff that like if you get this one, it does something else? Like I didn't know. Like there's a lot of things that like now like going back at it, I could probably be like, oh, I probably should just like guess the ones that were like already mentioned. But yeah, I think I probably should have paid attention to the fossils a little bit more, or just like talk to people about it more, because again, there's so much that goes into this that you don't really know about, and you just have to kind of fly by the seat of your pants.
Mhm. Well, it was someone who was eliminated from the challenge at the same time as you, Ava, who ends up actually finding the immunity idol and solving the riddle in order to get it. We have some conversation. Joseph mentions how happy he is to have immunity. I think this was actually a very pivotal round to win immunity. Just, I mean, not even just like looking at how everything broke down, but just because at a merge, especially in this situation where there's been a little bit of like swapping and stuff, you're not 100% sure who's aligned with who at this point. It's just nice to be safe. And I know, Connor, you mentioned in your confessional that you were happy to be kind of in the middle of the pack. You're not differentiating yourself as like a strong competitor at that point, but you're not like oh, I'm weak either. And I think that's fine. And I think it's better to finish kind of in the middle where you were rather than coming second. I think second's like kind of that one where it's like you hung out the entire time, you showed what you could do, but you didn't actually get it, so you're not safe. Isn't the best. But we're going to revisit something we talked about earlier, and that is the swapped Ardonix tribe's decision to all go to the shelter and discuss the vote right away. So the four of you go to the shelter, but the six from those other two tribes from the Tarchia tribe and the Swan or Marchosaurus tribe, they all get together in one room and they're like, "Oh, hey, look, this other group's all together, so we're just going to vote one of them out." So Beth, yeah, we're going to vote Beth, and the four of you are there, and you come to the agreement to, you know what, we'll push JB. And this is the time that we see your code word birthed into existence. The idea of Justin Bieber paying homage to your friend Kyle, who
Yeah.
obviously had the flying V reference in Minetta Bank, but is this another like chaos thing, or are you actually like planning on using this? Because we see in a confessional from Meredith right afterwards that you hop into another room and then immediately say Justin Bieber, and Meredith's like, "What's the point of this code word?" And then you don't say Justin Bieber at tribal council.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like shout out to Kyle, like for sure, because not like he knew obviously that I got accepted into it, much like you and the other guys did. Um, but the one thing that stuck in my head, because again, bless Kyle's heart, but he will not stop talking about the Flying V reference because he thought it was so sick that he like made a Mighty Ducks reference in a Survivor game. And I
It
mean,
was
like,
pretty
yeah,
cool, to be fair. Playing in that
it,
round, it was pretty great. Shout out
it
Kyle. It was
is.
worth
It
it.
is. I'm not taking anything away from him because like when I watched it too, I'm like, that's just like, but like that. If you again, John can attest to this. Like our friend group, like the nuanced things that we say, like don't at all mean what they should mean, right? Like again, like I try to make a Justin Bieber reference because I'm like, oh, JB just makes way too much sense. And then yeah, like I don't know, maybe honestly it was probably just like just an unforced error on my
Mhm.
end during tribal council. But at the same time, I was crunching the numbers, and I think my thought process going in was like, okay, there's four of us, and so there's obviously like a target on our back because we won two in a row. But the one thing that I was not necessarily banking on, but like I was hoping for was, and it got cut from the first episode because I can't remember which producer or which whoever was on production was in there with us when they're like, okay, well, you have to go to tribal council now. But Julie and I were talking the entire time, and then the production came in and was like, okay, you guys have to go. Like, we have to get this moving. And Julie was like, okay, okay, wait. Just like, okay, I want to work with you. And I was like, all right. So I was banking on the fact that like I hadn't got the chance to talk to, I mean, anyone other than the other three for a couple rounds now, but I
Mhm.
was hoping that like again that stayed true. And now watching the episodes back, I'm like, Julia was like a little sneaky when it came to a lot of this stuff. Like again, it was all strategy, but like I was hoping and I was banking on the fact that like we like shared common interests, like we both play sports, that kind of thing. That I could kind of teeter that in our favor. Or I mean, at this point, like it wasn't even our favor; it was just my favor because, again, like Emily said before, like they were gunning for the four of us to like. It's so easy, right? Like you can just
Mhm.
be like, these guys have won twice in a row. Like they haven't gone through it. Like they have to. Like someone has to bite the bullet, right? Um, but yeah, I think it was in retrospect, like if we had just said um any other name, I think it would have been a little bit harder too because there was no real justification that like in my head, like now looking back at it, it wasn't like a real justification. Again, like I even said in my confessional, I'm like, we voted David out on a coin flip.
Yeah.
And like everything else has been like I'm rolling a die, I'm flipping a coin. So I think in my head, like again, no hate on JB because he actually was like a great dude to play with and stuff like that. But it was just, yeah, I think honestly, if I really look back at it, it was what is the easiest way to pull a Kyle Jolly?
Mhm.
And it was looking at someone's name and realizing that JB is just short for Justin Bieber. And I was really hoping that someone other than the three people I was working with would have caught on because it happened in Kyle's season, right? Like it happened. He made a Flying V reference. I just used it at the wrong time. He did
Mhm.
it like in like crunch time, whereas like before tribal council, like I should have said it there, but like I should have said it at actual tribal council as well. Yeah, Justin
I
Bieber.
think if it gives you a little context for that one too, like to be fair as well, that vote, a lot of people had been feeling a similar sentiment to him. So I think at that time, so it also made, I think people were able to pick up on it as well because that sentiment had been kind of crossed across a couple social a couple of the circles by that point too.
Fair.
So we get into this, and the big thing with the conversation is you guys land on JB because you say, "Hey, I kind of want to keep Julia around," as you already mentioned, and Beth's like, and you all are like, "Hey, Beth, which one person do you want to protect?" It's like, maybe Richard. Richard, let's not do Richard. So you come to the conclusion to go for JB. We get a confessional from Erin saying that she saw the clue for the advantage during the challenge, decided not to drop. Emily, if you were in this situation where you're in an immunity challenge and you see a clue go out for an advantage, would you drop to try and get that advantage, or would you keep pressing on for the challenge?
I would drop to get the advantage.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
And
Because
it was sent out
really,
immediately. It was like as soon as everyone set out or like set up and like go, chat like this advantage is gone. It is sent out, and that clue's out there. So,
yeah, I think because I could fake it that challenge is not for me.
mhm.
Yeah, I could fake it and be like, oh gosh, like I had a cramp. I don't know, like I could fake that really easily and drop it and go for the clue and just make an excuse about it. But realistically, especially being that early into the merge, like I mean, like although I agree with you, it did seem like a pivotal time. I think that is, I know that from watching that challenge, it's not one that I would have won. And I know my skills and I know I wouldn't have won that. So it would have been like, go for the,
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I'm way too stubborn. I would have just kept rocking with it. I'll be honest.
Connor, I knew what your answer was. I didn't have to ask that.
That's fair.
But something I do have to ask is this: the thing is like your swapped Ardonic tribe was 4 in a group of 10. So, what was your guys' plan to get the majority? How were you going to get the majority in that situation in order for the vote to go your way?
I think it was a lot banking on the fact that most of the original members were still in the game. I
Hmm.
think that I was, and I said it before, I think banking on the fact that like I had like a pretty good relationship with Julia outside or before the merge happened, that it was like if I could just like chat with her for 2 seconds. And again, no one really tells you or you don't really see how hard it is because you can't hide anything. Like
Yeah.
you have to, it's all out there. So like again, like you mentioned, like oh, the 4 people went into this group. Like you can, no one's sitting there like in a room like counting people. Like oh yeah, like I can see this person, this person, this person. Like you can visually see it. It's on your screen. It's open for everyone. So a lot of it was banking on Julia coming in. So at least it's a 50-50. And then I feel like at that point it's like who can we talk to that really makes sense for us to not just like bring in, but like will be like a really good ally like moving forward. And honestly, like it's been a while, so I don't really know who we like came to, but I think Julia was the big one. And then I think honestly, like looking back at it, it probably was JB. And it was the guy we were
Hmm.
trying to oust from the get-go. Um but again, with the lack of time, with the lack of preparation, it's hard to like pull everyone aside and like talk to people individually because you can't just tap someone on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I want to chat with you for a second." Like you have to say it in front of everyone else. Um, so I think moving on in the game, it was definitely Julia one, and then honestly, you could plug in like Solve for X, plug in someone else. I
Hmm.
don't honestly like me like trying to like take charge on it, which I didn't. But I think if it was me, just given my lack of experience and like where I got to in the game, I think I probably should have let someone else handle it. Now it's a double-edged sword because if I let someone else handle it, I have no say in who it is. But I think looking back at it, I probably should have just like left it maybe to Erin to let her kind of do whatever. Um, so yeah, I think that's probably uh, Julia for sure, but we definitely needed someone else because I do not want a 50-50 that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Erin, uh, Erin's kind of doing a lot of work this round where she's going around and saying who is saying each other's names. She tells the original Tortilla tribe and everything that Beth's putting out JB's name, and then comes in and tells Beth, "Yeah, by the way, JB said your name, so that's also happening." Like trying to push these lines here. We do get a little bit of like talk about Brian's name being out there. We see, um, is it Joseph? No, is it Brian or Richard? Tells some people that like the names he's hearing are Beth and Brian, and JB has the most hilarious response of, "Who's Brian?" Uh, because sometimes that happens in these minis, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
I mean, again, like we go back to that Margret situation where Margret accidentally says that your name, Emily. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of this. I am telling you all this now, future DCP contestants. A notebook goes a very long way.
Oh yeah. And I didn't utilize mine at all. Like it's still
Yeah.
sitting in my drawer right here. I'm pretty sure there's nothing in it. Um, like communication is obviously like probably the biggest part of this game. Like you can botch every single challenge and you can still win the game based off of like good communication and relationship skills. But if you, like myself, don't remember half the things that go on, let alone someone's name, it's so hard to progress in a game unless like a few little things happen, aka like winning challenges, and you're like, I see the same four names on a screen every single time. I'm like, theoretically, these are the people I should be working with. It's so difficult to remember every little thing without having a sheet of paper in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because like the longer into a game you go, the more draining you are. I mean, we're 5 rounds into this game. It's been 5, 6 hours at this point. Like you
Oh yeah.
started early, you're going long, you're gonna feel it,
Yeah.
right? And you're gonna slip on some information, but you want to have that information present so you know who's saying whose name, who to keep an eye on because of that. We have a lot of conversation here. It's a lot of like again, people being like, okay, is it Beth? Is it JB? There's a big push from your grouping there, Connor. Like, um, Julia or Erin tells Julia, yeah, I'm pretty sure we have Brien. So I think like, and Beth's definitely with us. So like, we should have the numbers here. Um, we have a bit of like talk about Erin's threat level starting to come up here. The idea that like, Erin, like maybe we start pushing that returning angle. We got two of them gone already. Maybe it's time we start going for those other two. See, lasting legacy, Emily, right there, right away. People already talking about getting returnees out again now that you're gone. They weren't wanting to talk about it while you were there, but now that you're gone.
I will say
Um,
people did start talking about Erin's threat level early on because people had remembered seeing her on social media. They're
yeah.
like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure I've seen her like do really well. Like, we gotta like track that. It's
Yeah,
interesting."
nip this one.
Yeah, basically.
So we do see all these groups going on. Unfortunately, Connor, you guys aren't able to pull Julia. She doesn't want to vote with you guys. We get into tribal council, and this is where again it just like the serendipity of you going out because of pure chaos in this round is hilarious. Because when it comes down to it, Joseph's very glad he has immunity. He kind of just like yeeted himself this round. Was like, whatever, I'm going to get food, and then
Yeah.
I'll deal with this. Sometimes that is a brilliant decision. I mean, honestly, you should probably use your immunity to like push the vote, but food's really important too. So I get it, Joseph. Don't worry. We get into this idea again of like, okay, can rocks happen? Like, maybe. There's 10 of us. That's an even number. Rocks can happen on even numbers. Rocks can also happen on odd numbers in a DCP season because of the rules. Just remember the rules. Um, a lot of the conversation about how this vote's kind of like setting up how things are going to go in the future. And then we get into the votes cast. And we have so much going on. There's hope. Joseph hopes that a tie is being forced this time because Joseph's safe. Whatever. See what happens after that. Meredith goes in and votes for Brien because you, Connor, did not say the code word.
I did not say Justin Bieber.
Yet, had you said Justin Bieber, JB goes home here and you're still in the game.
Yeah. And that's what I said. Like in retrospect, like it really came down to just, which is crazy because like if you watch the episodes, how much like we're talking in the background.
Hmm.
Again, you don't see everything, but like you see most of it. Um, I just didn't try to be funny one time, and it was my downfall. Like let's just call a spade a spade. Like that's exactly what happened. Like I just didn't make the reference I was supposed to do. And again, maybe I put too much of the onus on everyone else to understand going into it.
Right.
Um, And seeing how frazzled everyone was, like even prior to the actual vote, you know, maybe I was like trying to be considerate of everyone else, and really you shouldn't do that. Like, don't be considerate of everyone else. Like, just play for yourself. Um, yeah, I mean, it was just one kind of like one mental misstep, and I was out.
Yeah, it happens, but it's beyond just Meredith voting for Brien that gets you out here because Richard also decides to throw a hinky vote on Brien in order to prevent a tie because he thinks it's going to be 5-5. But what that actually does is makes it a 4-4-2,
Yeah,
which there is a tie. And by the rules of DCP, which is following the Survivor Game Changer rules, as soon as there is a tie, there is no revote, and instead, straight to rocks. And alas, Connor, you are the you are also rocked out of the game following Emily here.
I've never.
You become the mayor of Ponderosa. Your game's cut short, and I'm sure I know I speak for production. I'm sure I speak for all of the DCP audience. Such a shame to lose such a great character this early in the game because of, again, you decide to be serious one time,
One
but
time. It takes one time.
here we are. What was your experience like playing the game for the first time?
You know, and like it's been mentioned either in the show or by you or whatever, like our friend group has gone through Selkirk, Kyle, Sean, myself. We've all done it, and I've gotten so many different perspectives because everyone played the game differently.
Mhm.
Um, again, like I actually, sorry, Selkirk, I actually haven't watched all of Selkirk's season yet. I watched Sean's because it was so short for him, and then Kyle wouldn't stop talking about it. So like I did watch because obviously like in turn, like given kind of where I was at in life, like I knew that like I could finally like put my name forth and do it. So um it's so hard because, and as John can attest to, we're all so different people. So like the thought process going into the game and then as well in the game itself is all so different. And I was like, well, I don't want to make myself look like a total dweeb and like not know anything about it. Because I mean, frankly, until someone got rocked out, sorry, Emily, I didn't even know what rocks was. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And as soon as I heard it happen, I'm like, oh no. Like, like, oh, that's like a real thing. So, um, I think like the biggest thing is, and it really doesn't become like fluent in your mind until you see it in the game. Like you kind of just have to stick with your guns and you can't falter from that. If I decided to play the character, I have to be the character. If I
Mhm.
decided to like, be this personality that people can talk to, but on the side, I'm just like, yeah, let's flip coins. I have to stick with it. And then I think the one time I hit the merge and I'm just like, okay, like now it's like a little bit more serious. I have to think about it a little bit more. Again, I just made one error and it just completely ousted my chances of winning. So, yeah, I think moving forward or like looking back at it rather, sorry, I think, um, I need to do a little bit better communicating with other people because now I'm like, okay, like you put a target on your back really quick, and it could be for like no good reason, right? Like
Mhm.
David didn't do anything wrong. He was just not one of the five of us that were in there. Like you have to be like very careful about what goes on.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the end of our time together. Once again, I'm so pleased to get to talk to you both. I hate the fact that we had to do it in this fashion. We have to end this the same way we end every episode after this snuff. I'm putting a caveat on it this time, though. Neither of you are allowed to say the word rock. So, Emily, what is one word to describe your game?
I'm trying to decide if I want to be funny or if I want to be mathematical.
Okay, I like it. I like it. Connor, same question to you. One word to describe your game.
Um, One word. Frazzled.
Perfect. Thank you both for joining me today. Wonder talking to you both. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Make sure you tune in. We have new episodes of Como Bluff coming out on Monday and Thursday this week, and a brand new episode of After the Snuff coming out next Sunday again. Thank you all so much. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.